Hi, everybody. We are back for another event. This time we're doing a special edition where we're going to be talking to some of our C members who have podcasts. And because they have podcasts, we are officially going to call them experts. So we have an opportunity to ask three of our guests different questions, different problems that we might have, different ideas about podcasting, and hopefully they can share with us their ideas. And if not, that's okay too. I will say one of our guests, I want to give a shout out to Rosalia. She unfortunately woke up ill today, and we're crossing fingers that she and her family feel a lot better in the days to come. So wishing you well, Rosalia, and thank you for agreeing to do this, but you know, life happens. So let's get started.
Oops.
Oh, that's okay. Let's get started. We'll go around and introduce you know what, let's introduce one another first, and then we'll have our podcasters introduce themselves. How about that? And then we'll just get rolling on our program. So Wendy, I see you're still moving. Why don't you, your face is moving. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Wendy Sellers. I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's gorgeous here today. And I am the author of Puberty, the Wonder Years, and a certified sexuality educator through ASECT, on a mission to change the world to make sure all young people are equipped to have a positive puberty experience.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. Carrie?
Morning, everybody. I'm Carrie Isham. My business is Power Up Education, and I live in Nanaimo, BC, Canada. And I specialize in sexual abuse prevention and the impact of pornography viewing on children and youth.
Good work. And Salima, I see your cute drawing there. Are you there? Oh, go, you deal with your chaos. No worries. Trust me, that was my morning. I get it. So Salima is one of our friends up in Canada as well. She has Salima Noon Health Educators or Sex Educators, and they go out into the schools and they have online programming too. She has a very robust program. And Salima is a super engaged member of the Alliance as well. So thank you for being here, Salima. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and introduce our podcasters. I'm going to do it from my screen, and we'll just have you introduce one another, then we'll jump in. So Jo, you're first.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jo Langford. I am a therapist and a dad, and I do sex and tech education for adolescents and their parents out of Seattle.
Oh, tech education. We are going to use you. That's good. Ellie, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Ellie. This is Lola. She does whatever she wants. I use she, her pronouns. I currently work for the International Planned Parenthood Federation, Western Hemisphere region, doing communications and general support with writing and developing content. But in about 3 weeks, I'm starting a new job at the Jewish Community and Family Services in Chicago as a community health educator there. So a little bit in between kind of positions right now.
So exciting. Kara?
I am Kara Haug, and my business is called Reframing Our Stories, and I work primarily with schools and families and churches to help change the narrative of how we talk around sexuality and have these conversations. So a little bit what I do, and I'm in Sacramento.
And don't you love the variety? I mean, we're all in sex ed, but we are all doing completely different things. That is what's so magical and beautiful about this group. All right, so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I do have a lot of questions here, but honestly, this is about our guests, our members. So I'm gonna just open it up for questions to see if anybody has any pressing issues right away. Otherwise, I can get the ball rolling with some questions. Anybody have anything that they'd like to ask right away?
I'll go ahead. So we are on the cusp of moving forward to do a podcast. It was supposed to start in September, but because we're doing high school, elementary school resource packages for schools with videos, downloads, and recommended videos, it's taken a lot of time. So I guess my question is, how much time per week, per month, whatever, per 2 weeks, do you dedicate to researching a topic, putting it together, and then putting it out there? Because I'm just, we're a 2-person show. My husband is right beside me. taking notes, and he's my business manager. And so time is always of the essence. Do you blog? Do you do newsletters? Do you do Instagram? Do you do TikTok? Do you do, so podcasts. So I'm just interested to see what the time commitment has been for people.
I can start. I started my podcast this last year. So I've had 20 episodes, and I decided, because I also am a 2-person show, but primarily a 1-person show, because my business partner works full-time and doesn't do any of the podcasting. And really what I think it has to do also with how you want to frame your podcast. I do much more interview based. And so mine comes across as, I find the people, I ask them when, we do scheduling, then I research and come up with their bio and find out more about them. And then that helps me discover what kind of questions I want to ask. And then I send that out ahead of time for them to review. And then the interview itself takes I allow an hour and a half for the interview, just for introductions. And my podcast is usually an hour, but then I'm doing all the editing, and that takes a good 2 to 2.5 hours to edit. And then I give it over to my business partner, who uploads it onto, because she's much more technically advanced than me, who uploads it onto my server, and then does kind of the social media aspect of that. But I will also say that because I'm primarily doing, a stay-at-home mom, trying to create a business kind of experience, I am not promoting it 100% as I could be. I'm not doing the TikToks. I'm just here it is. I don't know if that's smart or not, but I'm doing what I can with the time that I have. So it's an investment, and it takes a long time. And I actually just listened to a podcast of a friend of mine who they came out of the door running new and noteworthy out of 2016, got some really famous people who they could interview, and did really well. And they actually have decided to close their podcast because of the fact, for them, they were making money with it, but it's been hard for them to keep their sponsorship. I will say it's been changing with podcasting, especially within this last year, because so many celebrities are on it now. And so that has changed the listening-ship, I would say, for some of the smaller podcasts. That is what I've been learning from other people. I don't know if you guys would agree, those who are also podcasting.
I can go next. So just some background, I co-host the Embarrassed to Ask podcast, which covers everything that we say everything that you didn't learn in your sex ed class is kind of our tagline. And we've done, our 21st episode came out today. So I also started, our first episode came out in April. This was a project we decided to do in January. It's been a pretty quick process, but I think I spend about 10 hours a week on ETA, and I'll be fully honest, we don't get paid for anything that we do. So this is entirely a passion project for now. And it's great, and I love it, and I love the time that I spend on it, but we're not making any money off of it. So I spend about 10 hours between doing my notes, meeting with Christine, my co-host, to figure out what exactly we're going to talk about, the actual recording piece. We're lucky that Christine's brother does all of our he's an audio engineer, so he does all of our editing. We listen to it and mark the cuts, but he does all of the actual editing himself. And then I do about all the social media. So we post a fair amount Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then I repost a bunch of sources throughout the week. And I do most of that myself just on Instagram. We have not yet taken on TikTok, and we use Twitter a little bit, but that Instagram is really our scene. And so all of that is about 10 hours. And then we're actually going to take a break in the next few weeks. And from September to middle of September to early January, we're going to start to kind of come up with a plan to do sponsorships and think more about partnerships, and just take some time away from recording, because it does take a lot of time, and I love it, and it's also exhausting. And so we wanted time to just take a break, create a season 1, season 2, and have some time to rethink kind of how to start making money and to grow the podcast to be bigger than what it is now.
And then I guess I can chime in too, because I think my situation is just a little bit different. And I probably would say that I agree with Ellie. I think it's probably around 10 hours a week I probably devoted to it. Specifically, my podcast is called Appropriate, and it's kind of a deep dive into social media apps from a parenting perspective. So the social media apps that kids are using, and then these are the good things, these are the bad things, what to watch out for, how to monitor, that kind of stuff. And so I did, a fair amount kind of I work with teenagers, so talking to my clients and getting information, doing my own research, writing. I'm a script person, so I know some of you just kind of like do the live thing and fly by the seat of your pants, and I more of like I like to have at least the skeleton of my script that I'm going to say. So getting that prepped and then the recording, and I would just set like a time, like where I get my family out of the house and like have a quiet space, and then just go boom, 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 and try and get as many done as I can, and then spend the time, like Kara said, editing, which is always actually enjoy the process, but it can be pretty time consuming. And then scheduling them for uploads down the road is kind of how I tended to roll with mine. So depending on if you're a script person or not, if you're going to do your own editing or not, I think those kinds of factors make a really big, and then interviewing, if you're incorporating other humans into your timeline, we all know that always can be a time consuming thing too. So I think, depending on how you navigate within all those kinds of things depends on how much time or not your podcast may take you.
I was gonna say, and you have to determine like how much you want to, like, are you gonna do once a week? Are you gonna do once every 2 weeks? And like how much you want to publish them and stuff, and what is your cycle gonna be? Where I was doing like two a month because I knew that's what I could handle. But I also I just edited a podcast last night that I interviewed someone in March, and it will come out in September because I know that I don't have that bandwidth to do it like this. And so I tell people, I'll let you know when this comes out, and I let them know it's going to be a while, and they know that, and they're okay with it. So
I think most people who listen to podcasts and do podcasts are pretty forgiving in terms of understanding how many variables there are and how flexible everyone needs to be in doing it. So
That's a really good point, though. What have you all found? Is it best you get more listenership, or if it's once a month, every other month is more better, is less better? It's like a newsletter. You're trying to figure out how many times to put it out to get engagement. You don't want to overdo it. Have you discovered the best time as far as listenership?
can you say?
I found, oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I found that it's hit or miss. So we have stats on how many people download and listen to our episodes they come out weekly. And I noticed that people don't listen right when they come out. So like our, episode 21 comes out today, and that will probably only have 20 to 30 listeners today. But, as that'll grow up to about 80 or 100 in the coming weeks. And, we have friends that say like, I'm weeks behind. And so that those numbers grow. But there are some episodes that like had, 100 listeners within a few days, and some that only had 20 to 30. And I have yet to figure out exactly why that is. It could be like our Instagram kind of algorithm, and people are just seeing us more on certain times than others. Or like I've done some posting on Facebooks and in different Facebook groups, and people might see that at a certain time, and then that'll, draw them to a specific episode. So, or just the topic of that episode appeals to more people. So there's a lot of like moving pieces that I'm not sure are entirely in our control of who sees our content. And especially with Instagram and their algorithms that just constantly blocks a lot of what we post, it's hard to know exactly who's seeing what and how that impacts kind of our listenership. So it's not a great answer other than to just say it's like a little bit hard to predict.
I would agree, because there's some of my episodes, came out and they were like, maybe it was like 40 listeners the first week, but now like the number has risen significantly. Like people, I think sometimes they will find your podcast and then they'll do like just a big listen, right? They'll just like decide to like make it something that they just listen to for that month or something like that. So yeah, that's what I would piggyback on what she said.
Me too. So would I, me too.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, and I wonder too, Joe, with your topic, it's said, yeah, well, health ed more, because how do the apps go with mental emotional health? You know, what are the kids exposed to? I wonder, what is your listenership? Is it pretty, it seems like it might hit more of a broad audience than maybe just sex ed, because you've got your tech piece in there.
Yeah, because I mean, it's technology and kids, and so sexuality is always going to factor in there. So there's lots of kind of, you know, navigating sexuality and healthy boundaries, like in terms of physical health and technological health and digital citizenship, all that stuff. You know, I kind of swirl around in that area. And so my numbers are kind of all over the place. Like there'll be an episode on something, and then there'll be like 300 hits, and then the other one has 30 or something. So mine are kind of all over the place. And I think some people, like Kara said, probably binge some of my episodes, but mine are sort of specific. So a parent will be like, oh, my kid wants Snapchat. I'll go listen to the Snapchat episode and kind of learn about Snapchat, or listen to it with their kid and then, you know, have a conversation about it too. So that kind of stuff. So my numbers are all over the place.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So Salima wrote a chat. Where does your podcast sit in terms of priority compared to everything else you do?
I can take that one, I guess. So for me, my content, I think, was a little bit different than Ellie's and Kara's, in that I had a specific menu, right? So I wanted to hit the most popular like social networking sites that and apps that kids are using, and then talk about them for parents. And so I did an episode a week for a year and a half, I think. I started it right before quarantine happened, and then went on through there, and then kind of ran out. So like sort of since kids have been in at home and not in school in person, there just hasn't been a lot of new platforms that are emerging or causing problems yet. So I hit, I think, like 75-ish episodes, and then the well was kind of dry. And so my goal is to kind of go and update things, which I've done a couple of times as things change with certain platforms, or if new ones come on, then I'll add another podcast. So, but I haven't put up a new episode for a while. And I'm a therapist by trade. And so my therapy practice has gone nuts in the last year and a half. Like there's so many people hurting right now. And so, yeah, the podcast priority for me kind of fell off a little bit, but like Kara, I think, and Ellie seem much more sort of like dedicated to getting their content out. So, but I think they go at the topic matter a little bit differently than having like a set, I want to hit these things and then I'm kind of done. So.
Yeah, and I mostly started my podcast. I was like terrified to do the podcast, but I had so many people come to me and say, you should do a podcast. And I was like, well, I guess maybe I should consider this. And it was because they thought I was soothing to listen to. So, and it's something like I love storytelling. So my podcast is basically based around just learning about people's stories. And it's based on, because I have this religious bent within the work that I do, it's like the stories we've reframed around religion, sexuality, race, grief, or joy. Like that's what I focus on. And so for me, at first, it was just to prove to myself that I could do this. And I have grown up with a speech problem most of my life. And so I'm very vulnerable with it, because I hear some of the podcasts. I was like, oh, that's so terrible, right? Like in the beginning. So a lot of it was just to prove that I could do it. But I've actually then have connected with so many amazing people. And I think one of my superpowers is being random and just sending an email to like random people and being like, would you like to talk with me? Some people do. And I'm like, yay. And so it's like a great way to meet new people and make connections. And that's the thing that I love the most about the podcast and that I get to do. And I also so I interview some experts, but I also make it a selfish endeavor for me. And like one of my episodes was interviewing my journalism teacher who made like a huge impact on my life. And it was just such a wonderful episode and experience for me and for him too. And he was able to share it with his daughters. And so it was just like a lovely experience. So, but I also now am trying to use that as a way to market my business, right? To say like, if you want me to come and do a workshop, I can do this or blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of what I do. But also like, because I'm also trying to build curriculum and do all this stuff too, it's just kind of hit or miss, like when I can fit it in.
Yeah, and Kara, Salima writes, I don't know if you guys can see the chat, but she loves how you speak and she says you're so brave. And also, Carrie would like to know what your podcast is. Is it Reframing Your Stories? Is
It's Reframing Our Stories, the podcast. Really creative. It's based off of my business, so it's just kind of an extension.
And before we move on to the hardware, what platforms, what equipment, would you like to add anything to that, Ellie? Would you like to add to those comments?
So I started the podcast when I was in grad school. And so I wouldn't say more time because grad school is its own beast, but I had different time than I would having a full-time job. And then this summer I've only been working part-time. So I've been able to prioritize the podcast in a way that in a few weeks I will not be able to. And my co-host Christina also just took a full-time job. So now the two of us are part of our hiatus is also figuring out how are we gonna like continue to do this when we now work full-time. So we started it in a position where we had a lot more time to really dedicate. And it's something that both of us are really passionate about. And I can speak more about why we created it at some point, but we prioritize it. And also now we're trying to figure out how to make that work in the context of what else we're doing.
Well, if I could jump in here, Ellie sort of led into my question is, why do podcasts?
I think they're just so accessible, right? Like kind of everyone has access to them. They're free, there's not like a cost barrier to helping people with it. And it's just a great way to get more content out there. I started mine to make a bunch of money. I'm just kidding, that doesn't really happen. But I do talks, like I travel around internationally actually and talk about sex and tech and raising teenagers and all that kind of stuff. And one of the talks I do is talking about social media and the good, the bad, and the ugly, I call it. And parents like almost always come up to me and they're like, do you have all this information in one place, like a website where we can go? And I'm like, that would be a nightmare to curate and maintain and update constantly. But for years people asked me that, and then I just thought like, oh, I'll do a podcast, and then they can have that information. They want to know about TikTok, they can go listen to TikTok for 8 minutes, and then I can update it. Like that would be a lot easier than maintaining a whole website. And so that was kind of my main motivation to do this, is just to have some of that content and make it accessible to parents without having to maintain a whole giant website or spreadsheet or Excel nightmare, something like that. So
that's interesting. You're right, because a lot of us have websites and they are a pain to maintain, but you're right, having it all on a podcast, that's actually never crossed my mind. That's really a good idea, actually. Really good.
My next idea, I think, I'm going to see how I can pull off, is is doing basically like an audio book of one of my books, and just like having each chapter or something or section be a podcast episode, and making that sort of like an audio book, and seeing how that's. I'm just like chewing on that one, but yeah, I'm trying to kind of figure out creative ways to use the platform of podcasting to sort of push forward my brand. Of course, that also means posting things more regularly on social media, which I have also not been doing for a while. But yeah, big picture, that's the goal.
And I also think that podcasts are just so, there's so many of them, right? There's like so many things that you can learn. And I think people just take that as a time to really just indulge and learn for themselves. And it can be privately as you're working out, it could be as you're laying in bed and just need a rest, or when you're getting ready in the morning. And it just seems like it's like non-committal in that sense, where you can be like, oh, I can listen to this, but I need to pause, but I'm going to come back, and I think people just really appreciate that. And so, I mean, that's how I am with them. Like, I absolutely adore podcasts. So I just want to be a part of it, I guess.
And the topics, you can't think of a topic that there's not a podcast about. Like anything you want is out there. So it's and it feels like you're connected to other people and the topics that you're passionate about. Yeah, I love it, the platform.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Kim, go ahead.
I was just going to throw in, Carrie says, I listen to podcasts when I travel. And Salima says she does it to nurture her subscribers and followers. Growing up gameplan.buzzsprout.com. It's in the chat. It's her link. And Salima, I'll make sure I can get that link out to our members as well. So Ellie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, so Christine and I started ETA because we taught together virtually, and a lot of the conversations we had about some of these topics that we taught about, we spoke very differently together than we do in a classroom. And we wanted an outlet to be able to have some of those conversations that you just can't have in a classroom because you'll lose your job. And so that's where ETA was kind of born, as a way for us to kind of continue this banter that we have all the time over audio message or over text or over Zoom, but that didn't have anywhere to go. And we felt like people could learn from it, but we didn't know what to do with it. And so that's how we kind of started. And then our first episode, if anyone's listened, is about a class we took in grad school that was about STIs and the stigma around STIs. And that's how we kind of started this whole thing. We were so frustrated with this course. And then that kind of segued into a podcast on, and it's an outlet for us really to be able to share and to talk and to be really vulnerable a lot of these topics. And so people who listen to the podcast know all kinds of things about my life, which I still have yet to fully kind of comprehend what that means. But it's a much different way for us to speak about these things than we can in our paid jobs.
Cool, that's great. Yeah, I was just thinking, I like the idea of the girlfriend talk. I'm thinking about all the conversations I have with my girlfriends that we wish everybody would listen to us, because we know, maybe I need a podcast, girlfriend podcast. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of this, the equipment that you recommend, microphones, the space you use, which recording and editing platforms you use. If anybody wants to start talking about that, that would be extremely useful. Oh, wait, Carrie says something. Time limit for max engagement, 20. Oh, this is a really good question as someone who listens to podcasts, and I'm always in a hurry. I like my 5-minute podcasts, which is best, 20-minute podcasts, 30 minutes, hour and a half, a lot of podcasts. Have you found people listen? You have more listenership if you have shorter podcasts, longer podcasts? How does that go? And then Ellie starts talking about what she uses, lip sync, but we'll go on to that. But I'm kind of curious, time limit for maximum engagement, 20, 30 minutes. I'm kind of curious about that.
I mean, I do think the shorter ones people tend to listen to more, but I do like the lengthier conversations. I mean, that's why mine are an hour, because I like going, I'm a deep person and I just like, let's keep going, but if people know that, then they will take that time, but also it's because they can also pause and come back. So, but I do believe in our day and age, people enjoy the shorter ones, probably.
I agree. I know that's true for me. I like my podcast like 20 to 30 minutes. Like certain topics I could do an hour, but I like Carrie. I often do it while I'm traveling, and so I like to kind of jump into one and hopefully maybe finish it before I get where I'm going, and then I can do my next one, because I'm also pretty fickle. Like I jump around with all my podcasts, so I don't want to miss out on these ones because I'm spending 2 hours listening on this one. I like to mix it up. So
Christine and I are incapable of speaking for anything less than like 50 minutes together. So ours are typically around 45 to 50 minutes, but the first 10 is usually us like recapping our week or sharing a funny story, like not entirely related to the topic. And we always say, someone can pause it if they don't want to, you can always pause and come back. So we've done, I think our shortest was like 45. We try to keep them under an hour though, because we do feel like the hour is like the cap, although we're not always great about that.
Yeah, it is funny how everybody has different listening preferences. Yeah, so any other questions about the, I guess, the softer side of podcasting rather than the nuts and bolts of it? We can always come back to this too, because we have a half hour yet. So let's talk about equipment, because I know there are all different kinds of microphones out there and other situations that you can use to get your podcast off the ground. So would anybody like to jump in on that one?
I can.
Go
ahead.
Sorry. I started with the Yeti mic, but I will tell you, I've gone through 2 of them now. So part of the things that have happened with me is my Yeti died right when I was like going to do a podcast. So, and it's done that twice. And I was like, what is happening? And they did send me a replacement, but I think, and this is maybe my fault of not knowing if it's as adaptable to my, computer or not, or I don't know what has happened. So I have bought a 3rd microphone, and I went away from the Yeti. And I will have to get up and go tell you what it is, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But so I've actually had a lot of mic problems for some unknown reason. But right now, the one that I have seems to be working fine.
What do you have now? What did you buy?
Let me go get it. It's just over on my shelf. 1 second. I'll be right back.
And while she's looking, anybody else want to add like about your mics? Maybe we'll just focus on that.
I use the Yeti. I haven't had any problems with it. Christina and I went for, because we're not making money off of this, we were trying to go for like quality but also cheap.
That's the one I have now. Go ahead.
So yeah, I have a Yeti. It just plugs into my computer, and it's like really not hard to work. And I had actually borrowed one from a friend at first to just like see if I liked it before I bought my own. And that's the microphone. I have not had problems with it, but now I'm nervous.
Yeah, I have a techie nerd friend who hooked me up with a Yeti microphone. I haven't had any problems with it. And I use a Mac, so I had to kind of figure out how to get it to plug into the Mac, but then it was pretty seamless. I would say the best advice that I got in terms of podcasting was really nice set of noise canceling headphones, which I thought were really great in terms of editing, and a podcast box. Do either of you use a podcast box at all? They're great. They're just like little pop-up kind of IKEA sized boxes that are sort of like covered cardboard, but inside it's got all like the noise canceling foam on all the sides except one where you can put your face, and you have the microphone inside the box, and it sort of theoretically creates a kind of noiseless space except for your voice. It doesn't totally work, but I think it does help a lot. Especially, I didn't have a place in my house that, I hear podcasters like, I sit in my closet, like on the floor in the closet. I didn't really have a space like that in my house, so just like in my bedroom actually. And hopefully, like, my kids are being quiet, but like sometimes you can hear like dogs barking in the background or a plane flying overhead. That was one of my biggest memories from recording with the Yeti, because it's actually a good microphone. It picks up a lot of stuff, and so anytime there's like a plane flying, you can totally hear it. So I just like wait, and I'm saying while I'm editing, like, plane is still flying overhead, and you kind of wait till the plane noise dies out and then start recording again. But the podcast box really helped with that.
I also live in a very tiny house in California. So the place that gets the best sound is my daughter's room. So I kick her out and shut all the doors, and I just record in there and just let people know that it's not my space with Harry Potter everywhere, because I was confused at first when I do Zoom interviews, but it's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're really lucky here. My daughter moved out in January, so that freed up her room, and my husband's super techie. So we now have a studio in our home that we can do podcasts, and we've got like lighting in the sound bouncy things off the wall and the ceilings and all that kind of stuff. So it's been so handy, because when we were videotaping things before, it would take so long to set things up and to record and take things down. And now we just walk into the room, do the recording. He just has to make sure that the batteries and everything are good. So that's why I'm excited to like try the podcasting thing. I did have a question about building your audience. Sort of what are you doing to do that?
I mostly just post to social media and then word of mouth, and sometimes some of the groups that I belong to on Facebook, I'll post it if there's a certain interview that would be beneficial for that particular group. And now there's those different apps where you can put a sound bite like within social media. And I think that's helpful to get people to pay attention or like hear that. And then it kind of, makes them want to visit your page. And I just put it in all of my, stories and different things like that. But overall, I'm not awesome at marketing. So I don't know if other people are doing more.
I do similar. I'm like obsessive over the ETA Instagram. It's a problem, but so I do as much just like following of other people and hoping they follow me back as I can. I also like if we sometimes we'll mention certain resources or certain people on the podcast, we tend to send it to them and then they like will repost for their followers. We've like met a couple people that do similar. Part of our podcast is answering student questions that we've received, and there are other influencers and educators on Instagram that do that too. So we've like partnered with them and they'll share our stuff and we'll share their stuff. So it's like just as much networking and like reaching out and sharing of content as you can. And then also word of mouth has helped. People have messaged us saying like, they've sent it to their friends, and that kind of also builds the listenership.
And same with me, mostly more with Kara, posting to social media and not doing it enough as much as I should. And then word of mouth, like I said, when I do talks and then someone inevitably comes up and says, you should have all this in one place. And I say, hey, there's a podcast now. You can go check it out.
I like the idea of the sound bites too, because that for me personally as a listener, that does grab me. If there's some little sound bite that grabs me, I might listen. So do you know the name
Kara,
of
can I ask Kara what app? You said there's an app you're using that does that?
Yeah, the one I found is Headliner. That's the one I've used.
Thank you. That's a really good idea. I like that.
And oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I
go
saw
ahead.
that Carrie put on like what platform we use.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
I use Podbean. That's the one I signed up for to upload everything.
I use Libsyn.
That's what I use. I don't do it. Christine does it, but I have access to it.
Is it hard to do the platforms to upload the podcast? What's that entail?
Like I said, I use Libsyn, and I found them very accessible. Like I literally have like called them and asked questions, but it'll kind of Libsyn at least sort of walks you pretty clearly through the process if you're not super tech savvy. But you have to like find an image to put on for the image upload, and then load up your edited, ready to go section, and then you can pick the time when it's going to go, and then it sort of just does it all for you once you get all the pieces in. You have to put the author name and episode numbers, and you plug all that stuff in ahead of time, and then you just hit send, and it kind of just does it. I imagine Podbean is the same, Kara?
Yeah, it's the same. And I was going to say, before you have to be able to you have to submit it to the different people like Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. You have to submit your podcast, and then they like review it or look it over, and then that's when it will get on to the platforms.
I thought that Libsyn was hard to understand in the beginning. Like it took there's a bit of a learning curve, but it's much easier to understand once you do it a few times. And for Libsyn at least, it just has to be approved once. So once Apple and Spotify like approve it, then it's fine for the rest of the time you're using it.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Ellie. Like, but then it's the same thing each time, and so every time you just do A and B and C and D and E and F and G and hit send, and then it's gone. So.
And I will say I learned how to do all podcasting through YouTube. I have watched so many YouTube videos on podcasting, and I edit with Audacity. And so I've just been watching just constant videos. That's how I've learned how to do this.
Ellie, what do you edit with?
Well, I record on Audacity, but we have an audio engineer that edits, so I actually don't have to do any of that, which is beautiful. But I listen and we make the cuts, and then Greg, God bless Greg, he does it for us. So I don't know exactly what he uses, but something fancy. I was also just going to say with Libsyn, we've had a couple issues where it's like uploaded not incorrect, like we either uploaded the wrong version or something like weird happens, and it does take a little bit of time for them to like remove the old version and re-upload the new version. So like it happened with one episode where like some people were listening to the old version, some people were listening to the new version. It like took a little bit of time to sync that up, and that's just like kind of part of the process.
That happened to me once as well. Yeah. I use I record and then edit in GarageBand. I have a Mac, and then you can just sort of save it like a song, but then that's your episode, and then you can just use that on Libsyn or whatever to upload.
So just to clarify, you use GarageBand. I always wondered what the heck anybody would use GarageBand for. Now I know. Kara, you said you use Audacity too? And Ellie, you use Audacity that's where you actually record, and then you upload it to Libsyn, and that's the platform that it's housed on. And Kara, would you tell me the name of yours again, of your platform that you use? I'm sorry?
Podbean. Podbean.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
But I will also say I record all of mine on Zoom because I'm interviewing people. And so then you can just, I save all of them, which is not great, onto your desktop, but then now I'm putting them into different things so they don't eat up all of my space. But then you can just take the audio from the Zoom recording and then you just put it into Audacity. And that's how I edit. And I also like the quality, because sometimes my Audacity is like weird when I'm recording on it. It doesn't pick up the sound, I think, as clearly. And so that's why I enjoy interviewing on Zoom and taking the audio from Zoom and putting it in Audacity.
Nice.
That's a good idea.
We also record we record the Zoom and we record on Audacity, and Greg, like, I don't know how he does it, but he combines our Audacity files, and then we post a Zoom clip every week as a way to just get more people. We pick like some minute of thing that we were saying that sounds engaging, and then we post that every week just to bring in more of an audience, but we use the Audacity file for the actual editing and posting.
I'm impressed with both of your editing games. So that's impressive.
I was also going to say that if you have the financial means to hire a person to do the editing and sound, to do that, because it gives you the more freedom to do the podcast and the content and not have to worry about it. However, I would say to make sure, some people just use programs where they put in the audio to look for ums and likes and things like that and edit just all those out. Because I had a person in the beginning like launch me because I had no idea like initially what I was doing, and so they helped launch. And so I went back and listened to the edited version, but they didn't take out any of the things of like the crying baby who happened in the middle and things like that. And so I then ended up having to re-edit everything because they just put it into an automatic system. So make sure, like, if you are researching someone who's going to edit that for you, like, to make sure that they're not just using that technology and are really like listening to mistakes. So
that's a good point, actually. So with our three podcasters, any other tips like that that's probably not on a radar? Any things that you've learned along the way that were mistakes, AKA learning experiences that you little tips that we would never have even thought of. Like, I didn't know the ums and likes. That's a great idea.
We've recorded plenty of stuff that we've cut for various reasons. So like sometimes we'll record something, we'll listen back and we'll be like, that doesn't sound, not that it's offensive, but it could come across the wrong way to listeners. And so we'll cut it out. So sometimes it helps to listen, take like a few days, not remembering exactly what we said, and listen back, and you'll catch things like that and then just cut them out.
That's true. I agree with that. Like I definitely got into a habit of like recording on one day and then editing on a different day, and then kind of when you can't like smell the soup anymore, and then go back and taste it, and that it really makes a big difference.
It's a really good
And
idea.
I guess I can't think of any big giant tips. I would just say like do not be afraid to ask questions. Like I'm a therapist and a public speaker and an author. Like I was not a podcaster, and so I really benefited, I think, from just saying like, I don't know shit about microphones. Like ask my techie nerd friends, and then they'll point me in the right direction, right? So I think just asking for help when you need help, like calling Libsyn and saying, I can't figure out what are you asking with this question? What am I supposed to do with this? I don't know what this word means. And people will help. So yeah, don't think like you have to recreate all of your own wheels. Like there's people out there that know more than you about that topic. Like just find them and team up. So
Yeah, I had one of the dads in town who is at my daughter's school. This is his job, podcasting. He's done it in such a way that, he has sponsors paying him lots of money kind of thing. And so he let me just sit in and watch him do podcasts for an entire day just to see like how he did it. And so it was good for me just to kind of watch and see his process. And that was helpful for when I was moving forward.
I think another thing,
more toned down than he is. So.
I think another thing for me related to social media, we have a social media schedule and I tend to post on the same days each week, but I often have to remind myself like no one's waiting around for my like Instagram video, like it's going to be fine. And so like someday, like just a constant reminder that like no one's sitting there waiting, twiddling their thumbs for your Instagram post. And it's okay if like things don't get posted on time or you don't post 1 week. I like constantly have to remind myself of that. So the schedule's nice, and also it's okay to kind of stray from that a little bit.
Actually, that's super good advice for all of us and all of our work. Nobody's waiting with bated breath for the newsletter coming out, even though we put these constrictions on ourselves, which is good. I mean, we have to set goals, but yeah, we're not doing brain surgery, so it's all right. Let's see. So we pretty much answered all the questions I've had. Recording and editing platforms, the equipment, microphone, quiet space. We talked about your objective in hosting a podcast. Of course, we'd all like to make money, but it doesn't sound like that this is the best route to go at this point. I don't know. We have technically 10 more minutes left, so this is a great time to keep opening up for discussions. Ellie did list her email, embarrassed2ask podcast@gmail.com. If anybody has any further questions as you go through and start your experience. Anything else anybody wants to talk about with the podcast, or anything you'd like to share?
I have a question, Kim. So my idea was I want to do interview based, and I have a long list of people that I've connected in the past, and I've got the topics they want to talk about. My podcast, I wanted to highlight people in the field that have maybe a harder time advertising what they're doing. So like, sex somatic body workers and people doing like really cutting edge stuff. I have a friend who's doing trainings with sex workers around consent and trauma and things like that. So like really amazing work that is kind of hard to just like, you don't have like a thing on the side of your car, and you don't necessarily even have business cards, right? Because it's kind of edgy stuff. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I don't want to do like anything specifically on my business. I want to highlight the business of other people, and then hopefully they will then go and share what I'm doing to funnel people back to me for, work in different areas. But my whole focus was to help people who have like sexual challenges or childhood trauma or whatever connect with the right people, because you can't even really necessarily Google them. It's more word of mouth. So that's and I wanted kind of feedback on, do you think that's a good idea to highlight other people's work to see if it wraps around back to me? I wouldn't mind some feedback on that.
I think those are wonderful ideas, Carrie. And, like I said earlier, just like one of the cool things about podcasts is just like any topic that you could possibly think of is out there. So, if that's something that you're wanting to do, I would definitely encourage you to do it. But like Ken said, probably not going to make a lot of money, but it'll help somebody, and it'll help connect people, either to maybe some other part of themselves or to other humans out there on the planet, and that's fantastic.
And I think it'd just be interesting to listen to too, right? Like, because like you said, not many people know about their jobs or what they're doing, and that already I was like, oh, I want to listen to that, right? That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, there's so many people. I am so blessed to know people like, ethical non-monogamy, interviewing a professional cuddlist, somatic sex and trauma therapy. I wanted to interview Kim on like C and how that came about. Working a man who runs like multiple groups for parents who have gender non-conforming kids, and like why he's doing that, and pregnancy termination to create goddess empowerment. Like there's so many, someone who does vulva art, the only thing she creates is jewelry that are vulvas, like necklaces and earrings. And just like, I love promoting other people's work because it gives me a lot of satisfaction to know that I'm helping to elevate other people. And then in turn, it just comes my way, the more helpful I am to other people. And not everybody has like the money to promote their stuff, or an assistant or someone, right? They're just like starting from scratch. And yeah, so it's pretty fun.
I think that's really great. And, for like anybody listening, I would say, like, you can hear it in Carrie's voice, how passionate she gets about things. And if there's something that you really care about, that is really important to you, or that you know a lot about, even if it's like out there weird, just if you're feeling like you want to do a podcast, I would definitely just say, just try it and do it and see what happens.
I think it's a fabulous idea, and you're right. People don't know about all these other jobs, these careers, these interesting pivots that people have taken in their life when it comes to sexual health and education. I think that's a brilliant idea. Very different. And again, as business people, we always talk about the money piece, but honestly, in the end, I think it would circle around and bring more people to your site and to your work. Yes. But sometimes, and I think none of us go into this for the big bucks. We're in this for the passion piece because we really believe that this is something that needs to change. And I think your topic is really interesting, and you could really help a lot of people not only build their business, but find these people that need them. I love that.
I got my first client, or part of what I do too is I help coach or consult with people, right? And I got my first one from my podcast because they were specifically wanting to talk about religion and sexuality and things like that. She said, I've been listening to your podcast and I just really wanted to talk with you. And so it can bring you people. It can help for sure.
Wow. I love that concept. Very cool. Very cool. Let's see. Kara also put her email up here. Kara LB Haug @gmail.com. I will get this information out to people as well. But wow. Any other questions, Carrie? Especially, it sounds like you're on the cusp of a podcast. Anything else that's coming up?
I actually just wanted to thank the speakers today. I think, Kim, the thing for me about joining C, and I spoke to this at one of the events, was the loneliness factor, and like just feeling like, you know, you're in your own boat, kind of like paddling upstream. And I just appreciate the honesty that like it's not easy, that it takes time. And because I'm always like time conflicted, because I just turned 50 and I'm trying to move to a place where I'm really prioritizing my time and wanting my walks with my girlfriends and spending time with the people that I love and gardening and balancing off, like the need in the community is so huge right now. So I just really appreciate people's honesty, because I think sometimes I elevate people's like, oh, they're like so higher than me that you know, oh, like they probably have like 10,000 people listening to their and it's just, the reality is there's a lot of people doing it. So I just really appreciate that, like just it's so wholesome and organic, and just people are just really being kind.
We're all in this together.
We
I'll
are.
also just say part of ETA that we are really passionate about is we have a question box that listeners can ask anonymous questions and we respond to them. And we don't get a ton, but it is really rewarding when someone asks a question and we get a chance to answer, and to know that they like have listened to our content and feel comfortable asking us questions is like part of why we do this work. So we don't make money off of it, but like having those questions or having people, you know, reach out and say that they're learning from the work that we're doing, like that's part of that's the reason that I'm doing this. And so it's rewarding in different ways, just not through money.
Exactly. Yeah, we all have that passion for what we're doing. We've got to change the world. We've got to make sea change in sex education. So, all right. Well, I cannot thank you all. Our podcasters, our panel, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And for our attendees, thank you for coming as well. This is recorded. This will be published as soon as my computer's fixed, and everybody will have access to it. So thank you so much for attending, and I'm going to stop the recording now. However, if you all have further questions, you may certainly ask.